and welcome to this Pasture Summit video, Breeding Today for the Cow of Tomorrow. I'm Rain, dairy farmer and Pasture Summit member. As we look towards 2030, what is it we need from tomorrow's cow? What can be achieved and how can that be achieved? Joining us to discuss that are Waikato Sharemilker and Pasture Summit member Olin Greenan and world-leading authority on dairy cattle genetics and dairy breeding programs, Wickham of NZAEL. Pasture Summit events are events organised for farmers by farmers who believe that dairy farming can and should be rewarding and profitable, and that pasture-fed products are best for the consumer and best for the environment. I'd like to thank Olin and Brian, and to thank Dairy NZ for their support in producing this video. Also, a big thanks to LIC for the sponsorship of this video and their ongoing support of Pasture Summit. We hope you enjoy this video and welcome any feedback via our Pasture Summit website or email. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Malcolm Ellis, General Manager in New Zealand Markets here at LIC, and we're coming to you from just outside the Bull Barn here at Newstead. I want to firstly compliment the Pasture Summit group for the insight to focus on such a pivotal subject area such as herd improvement. Here at LIC, this is a big part of what we do every day, thinking about today's decisions that are going to lead to the type of cows we're going to milk tomorrow. I was grateful to personally be involved in the first Pasture Summit held here in New Zealand last year, and I know the follow-up in Ireland would have been equally as successful had it not been for the disruption of COVID-19. The initiative to share insight on specific topics via videos such as this is a great concept, and LIC is delighted to support the focus on genetic gain and herd improvement. When you take a moment to look back over time, we've certainly come a long way, with today's dairy cows unrecognisable to those milked a generation ago. And Brian Wickham makes this very point extremely well in today's video. I'm a fourth generation dairy farmer myself. I often talk about being brought up with a piece of sunlight soap in my hand, and in reality, the use of that sunlight soap was all around milk letdown. Cows didn't have the temperament they do today, and they definitely didn't have the efficiency of conversion of pasture to milk like we enjoy today. We've come a long way, but it is about the future, and as the industry is resetting, we now see herd improvement being a really key part of the focus of New Zealand dairy farmers. At LIC, we have a clear view that efficiency is efficiency irrespective of the farm system, with a good cow being one that can convert pasture to milk solids in a highly efficient manner, excel in fertility and longevity, and go about her work with little fuss. We believe there's significant gains to be had via sharper focus on herd improvement and the realisation of cow peak within the industry, and recognising that there's 160 kilograms of milk solids difference between the top quartile and bottom quartile of all herd tested cows tells us that there is some room to move by putting a sharper focus on herd improvement. LIC is firmly focused on the cow of tomorrow, with a heavy focus on environmental considerations, heat tolerance, fertility, the advantage of fresh sex semen, and significantly the ongoing developments of genomic technology. LIC is guided by the National Breeding Objective, but additionally consistently revisiting selection thresholds on individual traits to ensure we are assisting you to breed cows that are fit for purpose for your farm. Enjoy the video and the subject matter, and once again thank you very much on behalf of LIC for the opportunity to be associated with this event.
Hello and welcome to this Pasture Summit video. My name is Olin Greenan. I'm a Pasture Summit member and a 50-50 share milk 650 cows with my wife Anna and our two sons Jack and Noah in Morrinsville in the Waikato. I'd like to thank Dairy NZ and LIC for their support in putting this video together. And I'm joined here today with Brian Wickham, who's going to introduce himself now.
Okay, I'm Brian Wickham. I was born in Taranaki. In my career, I spent 20 years with livestock improvement and its predecessors. In 1998, I went to Ireland to help establish the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation. I retired from that in 2013, and I now work as a private consultant, and my current job is managing New Zealand Animal Evaluation Limited.
So a little bit more about the farm that we're currently share milking on. We're milking 650 cows through two cow sheds. We're a System 2 farm. We've got a strong focus on pasture utilisation. We're aiming to utilise around 14 tonne pasture and crop eaten. This is good for our business. It allows us to create surplus cash in order to service debt and ultimately reach farm ownership. Brian, we're pasture only here through mating, and we've achieved good results year on year. There's a sort of a perception out there that we need to be feeding cow additional food to get them in calf. What's your thought on that?
There's no doubt in my mind that the cows that you have the choice of, or the genetics you have the choice of, are well capable of producing profits with pasture alone. The question that's always being asked by animal breeders is sort of what combination of traits in these cows do we need to achieve that? And that's really the focus of the two indexes that we have in the two countries, the BW and the EBI, BW New Zealand, EBI Ireland.
So what, in your opinion, do you think are the most important of these attributes?
A pasture system is a year-round system. Pasture grows with a peak, and you're very good, obviously, at utilising that peak. But that means that the cows have to be calving at the right time. And apart from the obvious traits like the milk and fat, milk protein, milk fat, there's the fertility consideration. And one of the lessons that I learned from my Irish experience, working with your colleagues, is that fertility is a trait that can be genetically improved, and it's a really important trait for pasture farming. What we found in Ireland is that we're there selected for calving interval. If you've got 2 calving dates, then you can measure calving interval. And over a period of years, the change in fertility of that population has been spectacular.
So if I could ask the question then, I don't see it myself that, the breeding companies are coming and here's a bull really high in fertility. It's sort of, it's doing good milk solids, just longevity and that. Where or how can we get that fertility thing straight more to the fore?
Well, it's a question really of emphasis. There's 2 things. Have we got an accurate way of measuring fertility? And secondly, how much emphasis are we going to give to it? And it is very difficult to measure fertility accurately because it's lowly heritable, and the data that's available is not great. But if we've got the numbers, then we can do something about it. The emphasis is the other point, and that was, I think, something that we did with the EBI. In retrospect, maybe we put more emphasis on fertility than the straight economics might have indicated, but the message from Irish farmers at that time was that if you don't give us bulls that are plus for fertility, we will not use them.
So Brian, if I want to get better fertility in my herd, so what's the key things I'm looking for in bull selection?
Well, ideally what you should be able to do is just look at the BW, the index that takes the best combination of all of these traits, and select for that. I have to say that right now we are having another look at the BW and how it's constructed, and asking the question of whether or not it has enough emphasis on the fertility traits. We're also asking the question as to whether we're measuring fertility in the right way in the genetic evaluation system. Having said that, the information that's already in there is contributing to the BW. Fertility is getting emphasis. If you thought it should have more emphasis, there's nothing stopping you insisting that the bulls that you buy go for a higher fertility, and there's an index or a breeding value there that you could use for that purpose. And that's just related to the Irish experience. That's what was happening. Initially, farmers were selecting on the breeding value for fertility, independent of the index. And that caused us to respond and say, well, look, we don't have the index quite right for Irish farmers. And I think my own view is that we probably don't have it quite, the BW, quite right for New Zealand farmers.
So with that Irish example, is there then a trade-off of, production or other traits, or can you have them complement each other? If I select high fertility, am I going to see this massive decrease of production? Or I guess, farmer, that's the big concern of farmers probably.
Yeah, I mean, there's no free lunch, and there is a trade-off. And so it's not one or the other. It's really about fine-tuning so you get the best combination. And I think if you look at these indexes and the way we construct them, ultimately the goal is to breed animals that are profitable under the farming situation or systems that you're operating. And if we get it right, we can do a great job. If we don't get it right, then we get all sorts of problems.
So as an individual farmer then, Brian, what can I contribute to ensuring that maybe this fertility aspect is emphasised more?
The most important thing you can do is keep good records on your animals. When I say good records, I mean every animal, and record the facts. Don't record the opinions. Because the way this breeding system works everywhere in the world is that it depends on the data coming from farmers to produce the genetic evaluations. So that's the parentage of the animals we need to understand. We need to have that accurate. We need to have good performance records. So for fertility, we need to know when they calve, when they're mated, and when they get pregnant, or pregnancy testing if that's what you're doing, and then when they recalve. If we've got that information and it's accurate, it will contribute to the genetic evaluations. And with your herd, I mean, this is a big herd. There's a lot of animals here, and very valuable data is coming from it. The other bit of it is about what sort of bulls you use and where you get involved in the breeding program. A lot of herds, perhaps like your own, you use a selection of bulls. You could get involved in breeding programs, progeny testing, breeding bulls. There's a whole bunch of ways you can get involved as well, and contributing to the future generations.
We actually have our own responsibility in gathering more data, and like anything, if you don't measure something, you can't manage it.
Exactly, and you are the breeding companies. When you look at what's going on inside the breeding companies and the genetic evaluation systems, it's all the data that comes from you and the other farmers in this country that are making this happen.
So, Brian, you're telling me that the fertility indexes aren't right. So, what are you doing about it?
So, this is an annual question that we ask. The BW is updated every year, but in the where we are at the moment, my feeling is that there's more than just the annual update required. So we have initiated a 2-year program, which we're in the middle of, to have a really good look at how we arrive at the index and how we arrive at the weights that we put on it, on different traits. And this is becoming really important with some of the environmental traits like methane emissions and nitrogen, because some of those, I think a lot of us would say we should put some emphasis on it, but it's pretty hard to justify using the current approach where we just, do an economic model and arrive at some economic weights. So this is a project that's underway as we speak. It's 2 years. We're about 6 months into it, so you can expect to see a fair bit of activity in the near future on this.
So, Brian, as you see, our herd, it's a Frisian cross herd. Obviously, we get our required number of replacements. We put about 25% of the lower BW cows into Hereford, into beef Hereford. But the remaining then running Jersey sweeper bulls, we've obviously got the issue of some bobby calves. And I guess my wife Anna and I are constantly looking at how we can navigate our way around that. Previous experience, we've tried Hereford bulls over the crossbred cows and just resulted in lots of difficult calving. So Can you tell us, maybe there'll be lots of farmers out there wondering where to from here? What's the future hold for that bobby calf, or what can we do to sort of, to try and mitigate that issue?
Yeah, I think we need to really think very clearly about this one. I mean, what is a bobby calf? Most of them are males, and there isn't a market for those calves. Nobody has got a good way of coming and buying them from you and raising them to beef and finishing them profitably. So what's the solution to a problem like that? And for New Zealand, with its big herd, it is a big problem that we need to be facing up to. There's a number of options available. They're males, so maybe sex semen is a possible solution, so we get a whole lot more females. They are calves that are not worth finishing for beef, so they don't have the potential to grow fast enough and profitably enough. So maybe beef crossing is a possibility. The value of the beef is from a dairy cross. A lot of it from this country goes off to be hamburger meat. So the product that results is not particularly high value. So other things we could do to have beef bulls that cross with a dairy cow produce a unique product which is more attractive in the marketplace. And I mean, I was interested, and I hope people will forgive me for constantly referring to the Irish, but you'll be sympathetic to that. Last week, the Irish launched their beef quality index, which is based on the eating quality of the meat. And frankly, they got the jump on us in terms of a possible premium product for the world market for beef. And I think it's these sorts of things we need to look at. The other angle is, and I hear this from other countries, is these cows calve annually. So we're hooked into an annual cycle of calving, and of course, at least one calf each. Some people are asking me as well, could we calve them every second year? Now, I know there's some implications for milking them through, but with genetics, it is just amazing what you can do if it's something you really want. And I have no doubt over a period of time, if we really wanted the cows to milk continuously for 2 years, we could have a breeding program that would produce those sorts of animals. So I guess that the bottom line of all of this is that there probably isn't a quick, easy fix. But if we want a good, long-term, solid solution, there's any number of options that are available through the good use of genetics and breeding programs.
So, Brian, there's a few tools available to me currently if I want to fast-track the genetic gain of the herd. Some would suggest AI in your heifers and whatnot. But what would be the ultimate way to really fast-track that and move our indexes forward at a faster rate?
One of the recent developments, and it's not so recent, is the use of genomic technologies. And what I mean by genomics, it's a way of looking at the DNA of an animal and relatively inexpensively getting quite an accurate measure of what's in that DNA. So that's what genomics is. Well used, we know that technology can increase the rates of genetic gain by 50 to 100%. And that is spectacular. The technologies have a whole bunch of benefits, and if we use them right, that can result in much more rapid progress for you.
So if I was interested in implementing that on the farm, how does it work, or how quick would I get? Is it an instant sort of results, or what's the sort of time period for it?
It's a great question, Olin. I've been involved in this technology for more than 20 years. So before I went to Ireland, I was involved in a big project with Livestock Improvement Corporation at the time. At that time, we were testing for 300. I just want you to remember this number, 300 markers, and it was a multi-million-dollar research project. In 2000, so that was 98, say, 10 years later, 2008, a new development of this technology came along. 50,000 markers, 300 to 50,000, was available, and this time I was in Ireland, for €300 per animal. Okay, so this was a major breakthrough, and it has revolutionised dairy cattle breeding. And here we are 10 years later, or 12 years later. That cost is now down to, in New Zealand dollars, $30, $31, $32 for 50,000 markers. And NZAEL, livestock improvement, a lot of breeding companies are heavily involved in trying to find ways of delivering this technology to you. So Olin, I'd be really interested in knowing what you would like in the cows that you're going to be milking in the future, and perhaps the cows your sons are going to be milking when their time comes.
Yeah, probably need Jack and Noah for that. I suppose if they need a cow that can milk themselves, it'll be useful. Realistically, yeah, I suppose it's always a question farmers ask what they want for tomorrow's cow. A couple of things for me. I mean, we keep harping on about that longevity thing, and I think when you look at the national statistics for not-in calf rate, they're appalling, and we're losing a hell of a lot of good stock falling out the bottom end, particularly in their seasonal calving. You know, they're empty, they're no use to the system. So I suppose we want that. Some of the environmental things on the horizon need to be addressed, I believe. Heat tolerance, if climate changes for real and we're having harsher weather conditions, is the cow able to adapt to more extreme conditions? The other obvious one is environmental, with the low end footprint and greenhouse gases. So I'm not asking for a lot. I'll add another into my wish list with the scrutiny on overuse of antibiotics. I guess we need a resilient cow that can look after herself and hasn't got that dependency on medicines. I think flexibility around milking frequency, not only from an environment point of view, but from a people-friendly point of view. If we can have more flexible milking regimes, it will certainly make the industry more attractive to people to come and work on it. So yeah, have I got this pie in the sky wish list, or what is out there on the raisin?
Just listening to you, Olin, I'm reflecting back on the cows that I milked on my father's farm when I was a little bit older than your kids, 10 or 12, and they were very good at kicking, very hard to get milk let down. We didn't get much yield. So sort of thinking about where we are today, and that's now more like 60 years ago, we have made a lot of progress, and I don't think anybody should forget that. And it's very easy to forget it because, you've come in the last 12 years and all you're seeing is the progress in the last 12 years. So the cow that farmers are milking today is certainly one that would have fulfilled the dreams of my parents 60 years ago. They would have been just delighted to have a herd of cows like I saw in your farm earlier today. And I guess that's the challenge for us as an industry, is to make sure that we do have programs in place, we're collecting the data, we're using the best technology to make sure that the cows that your sons get to buy for their share milking are spectacularly better than the ones that we have today. And that's possible, and genetics is a great tool for doing that.
So I guess we're seeing some some bulls available now, and they're, designated low-end bulls or methane and that. So from your experience in looking in, what sort of accuracy are that? Or, if I go out and use all of them, am I going to solve all the problems for the future?
The way I look at it, Olin, is that we're in an industry that needs innovation. We need people that are trying to do things better for the future. We're dealing with biology, and there are no free lunches with biology. So if we're trying to reduce the nitrogen losses from the cow or the nitrogen emissions, then we need to think about what's actually going on there. And that cow is going to be consuming feed, and somehow or other diverting more of the nitrogen into products, valuable products, milk and meat, and less into urine. That's biologically what we want to do. I have no doubt there are genetic pathways that can alter that. The challenge is to find a way of measuring it, establishing the genetics, and getting a system in place to bring about genetic improvement. Again, I remind you, no free lunches. So if you want to put a lot of emphasis on low nitrogen, then you might have to take emphasis off something else. And that's always just an economic trade-off.
So I guess, covering the low end thing, is there a similar concept around greenhouse gases or the methane question? Because that's another topic to the fore of farmers' minds as well.
Yeah, and I mean, if nitrogen in urine or milk is difficult to measure, methane is an order of magnitude more difficult to measure because it's a gaseous product, and that's not easy to trap from animals. There's a lot of work going on, but again, just think about the biology of this. What is methane? It's a gas that is produced by the fermentation of the grass inside the rumen of the cow, which gets burped out. And so lots of people are saying, well, how can we trap the energy that's contained in that methane? I mean, after all, methane is highly combustible, so it's full of energy, and it's a waste product from ruminants, if you think about it. And again, biologically, there's all sorts of options. You might think about what you could do with the microorganisms in the rumen, or think about possible genetic pathways that a cow has. And I think we've got a long way to go. But right now, the best thing we can do is get cows that, for the same amount of feed, produce more valuable product and cost less to do things. So we are already placing a lot of selection pressure on reduced methane intensity for the products that come off your farm.
So there's a bit of a perception out there, and I don't know whether it's driven by various companies or whatnot, but it's necessary to feed some form of supplementary. The grass is not good enough to get cows and calves. I guess for me, looking at that, are we in danger of, there's lots of people doing that, then we're creating a cow that has a dependency on this additional feed. Is there a genetic connection there, or do I have no need to worry?
It's a really good question, and this is one that I've found that my answer has changed over my career. If you'd asked me that question in 1998, when I went to Ireland, I would have given the answer that a lot of people would have given. It's not genetics, fertility is low heritability, you just have to feed them well. A year later, or less than a year later, I arrived in Ireland, and there was a trial going on at Moore Park comparing high and low index cows. And the results were very clear. The high index cows were less profitable than the low index cows. Exactly the wrong way around. And why? Because the high index cows were infertile. And no matter how you fed them, you couldn't get them in calf. And this is, I think, really the answer for me, is if they're not getting in calf under pasture, they probably won't get in calf if you feed them supplements. And it's been one of the greatest lessons I think I've had in my career, that we got that all wrong. We should have always said this is genetic, because that's what it is. And if we have the cows with the right genetics, they will get in calf whether you feed them supplements or not. So, Olin, we've talked a lot about fertility. I'm really interested in what sort of fertility performance you're achieving with your herd and how you're doing that.
Okay, so I guess if I just track back, we bought our first herd in 2009. It was a straight Frisian herd, quite high empty rate, I think at the time, 13-14% when we inherited it. So we went straight into Jersey Cross, and the owner at the time was looking at me thinking, oh, you won't get money for your calves and your cull cows. Anyway, we knew we were on a bit of a crusade. And so first year I think was 68%, and then we slowly got that up to 75, and then we've always been sitting around. We got 79, 78, 76% last year. So we haven't went under 75% in the last 10 years. Empty rate has been never been above 10%. We've pulled mating a bit shorter with 10-week period. Our target is 10%, less than 10% in 10 weeks. How have we done that? I guess it's been pretty simple, and it's a rinse and repeat system. So I guess we don't just set out a week, we start mating on Monday. We don't just set out the week beforehand and think, oh, you're going to magically get 75 again. It's the whole year round, and it's the old body condition score at calving. It's sort of adequate feed. Now, to me, in a nutshell, it's pasture quality is probably one of the key things. So we calve down to the optimum condition score, 5 or just slightly under. We have adequate pasture cover. We have the ability in most years to farm right the way through to balanced day without any need for supplementation. But the key thing in the management of our farm is that residual management. That is the key. I suppose and this is where the sort of why don't you have to feed supplement question comes into it. The horsepower in that grass is in the leaf of it. So if we're consistently nailing those pasture paddocks from the start of calving, we're ensuring adequate high energy feed coming into mating. So as I say, you can't do that the week beforehand. We couple of things we do, non-negotiables. We BBD screen the herd. We're not vaccinating, but we are vaccinating our young stock. We are at the naive, like our herd is very low. It's a bit of a risk, so we are quite conscious of biosecurity because that could quickly unwind all our hard work. Seedering, we have a set goal less than 5%, so it's written into the budget. This year, for example, we've used 3%, but it's very targeted. It's just on those first, second and third calving, and they got to be above herd average BW. We don't even worry about the late calvers at all. So it's very much simple sort of a system, and I guess it's the attention to detail during that mating period as well, the heat detection and things like that. But it's a great, like, to me, the day we scan our herds, it's like an annual exam result. Everything we do over the whole 12 months comes out on that scanning result, and I love it because it really just hinges everything that we've done the whole year, our pasture condition, how we fed the cows, our animal health, husbandry, all those things together. So we look forward to that day every year.
You obviously pass.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. There's always room for improvement. So I guess it's time to sum up, Brian. We've had a really good chat here. I'd say we could talk literally till the cows come home, which might be too long away. I guess a few key things for me, just listening to the wealth of information you've shared with us today. The genomics are there, and I think us as farmers, we need to sort of actively pursue them and see where are they at. When you listen to sort of historically how they've improved breeding in other countries, we need to be part of that. The other thing we have is responsibility as farmers to generate to this database as well. We've all got smartphones. We need to be better at our recording, and I think confidence in the system. The ability to put cows in calf, because I know I can do it. I've proved it here, but I think it'll be refreshing for others to hear that. So I guess my advice to them is, don't be afraid and don't be afraid to go pasture alone, that you will still achieve the results. So I'll leave it over to you, Brian, to see if you've any final thoughts to share with our viewers.
Well, thanks, Olin, and I've certainly enjoyed this opportunity to meet with you. Great to see what a Monaghan boy can do when he gets into New Zealand. And I recall that little discussion we had about your dad's herd and the data that's coming from that. And for me, the summary is that cattle breeding is a partnership of the current farmers with the people like myself and the people I work with who put the infrastructure together to identify the animals that are going to be good for the next generation, because this is a long-term serious business. If we do it well, we can leave a fabulous heritage for the next generation. We can have animals today that are profitable for you to use, and we've got a much better future for our industry if we do that. But we really have to be well organised and very cooperative and collaborative in that whole process. So really appreciate the time and your efforts as well. Well done.
No, thanks, Brian. So that's a wrap from us, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this thought-provoking video from Pasture Summit. We'd like to just thank Dairy NZ and LIC for the generous sponsorship. and mostly thank Brian here, because without him it'd be pretty boring just listening to me here rabbiting on about myself. So stay tuned, and I hope you'll enjoy this one. Spread the word around, and yeah, keep an eye out for our next video. Thank you.